ladies and gents, and welcome back to another edition of SuperCoach Edge, and of course another entry for Damo's team talk coming out of round 14. And we are back on deck, of course, back on home soil after a couple of weeks hiatus, working abroad in the big US of A. So sincere apologies, of course, for no team talk or even last week. Liam, of course, was running solo for the previous 2 weeks, but last week was sick himself, so unable to put out any content related to our weekly podcast as well. So nonetheless, we are back and we are keen to get stuck into all things SuperCoach. So let us, without further ado, check out how we went. So we ended up scoring a 1,971, which was just slightly below par, as you can see there, in terms of rank. Ended up sliding 82 spots to now sit 2,269th rank overall. It was okay. I mean, it was a tough week. Going into this week, I was always expecting to be up against it. I'll get into it in a moment in terms of how I was faring, but from a couple of weeks out, I think I was looking at around about 19 players on the cards, but things have changed, and we had to adjust on the fly. So around 14 and 15, these bye weeks, I think for pretty much everyone, going to be a very, very tough couple of weeks, and of course this was for me. Could have been worse, so is what it is, of course. But let's jump into how we actually fared individually, of course, in terms of how our players scored. So as you can see here, if you're watching us on YouTube, Luke Ryan first up, 79. He was projected for around about a score of 120, 130 or thereabouts, I think, from memory, and scored a 79 and was well below par. Actually, his lowest score of the season. So I feel for those people that actually brought him in this week, thinking that against the Dogs he was going to score well, which I think he had previously in recent times. So yeah, it was a bit of an interesting and frustrating one from Le Seagull. Next up, we have Nicky Dacos, of course, 129. Was by and large tagged out of the game by Will Phillips, who was the late in for North Melbourne. And Clarko, I do not know what he was doing, but a classic case, again, of coaches trying to just outsmart themselves. And I think he did in this case because he ended up subbing Will Phillips. I think it was around about, was it third quarter, maybe halftime. It made no sense whatsoever because Will Phillips was actually doing a really, really good job on Dacos. And Wispy Dacos, he just, when he was let off the chain, went absolutely bananas. So ended up scoring that 129, kicked a couple of goals as well. But yeah, for us, in terms of SuperCoach, happy with that. Harry Sheasel as well, the Shees Nuts, 120, kicked a nice goal as well. Took a one-handed mark, if you don't mind, as well, just displaying his talent. 120 for him was a nice sight to see. Now, this guy here, Dan Houston, as well, I probably should get into a bit of a segue here, the trades that I made, but Dan Houston was the man that I brought in via a correction trade of Tom Stewart, which I'd been sort of discussing probably about 3-4 weeks ago, looking ahead to round 14, and it paid dividends, of course, with Houston scoring that 174. And you might have seen, if you are following me on Twitter, of course, I did put up a poll asking people as to what their thoughts were in terms of the player that I should try and bring in off the back of Stewart. Because with Houston, the one thing that, even though I did like him with his high floor, his high ceiling was something that was lacking this season compared to the last. And it's quite ironic that I was worried about that, and he came out and scored his biggest score of the season with 174. So he kind of gave me a big old finger and said, take that on debut. So super, super happy with that. The other option I was looking at for him was Hayden Young, and potentially just holding off and trading Stewart to Holmes as well, who is the man, the culprit, who is kind of limiting Stewart's scoring by and large. So that I'm very, very happy with. But let's just go into ever so quickly my trades and just sort of recap them, and especially last week as well, because we didn't have a team talk last week. So last week I had Harley Reid going out for Dawson coming in from North Melbourne. Of course, he got injured, didn't really offer anything because I think he scored 0. Closey went out and Zorko came in, which was nice, and Jordan Sweet went out for English as a bit of an upgrade. And then on the weekend, as I said, Stewart went out for Houston. Moyle ended up being traded out for Kruger to give me a little bit of cash, and likewise with Darcy Jones from the Giants going out for Dowling of the Crows, just to give me an extra player there as well. So that was my trades and my moves on the weekend. Nick Martin obviously didn't play. Neither did Dawson or Zach Reed, of course. Into the midfield, Bontempelli 162, and it was reminiscent of, I guess, Michael Jordan's flu game, because he came out and smashed it despite being under the weather. 162, kicked, 2-3 goals or thereabouts, and incredible performance by LeBont. And he was kind of my backup option for captain. So, yeah, it worked out well. It would have worked out even better had I done that. Of course, speaking of which, captaincy-wise, VC-wise, ended up putting it on Zorko, 141, the first game up, of course, and a lot of people would have put the VC on Zorko. Happy enough to lock that in, of course, because the 125 plus mark is the lock and load threshold for me. So, only missed out on an extra, 21 points by going Zorko over Bont, but of course would have been a bit of a risk to do that if I was to change. Caleb Sarong, 96, below par for him, and he's kind of had a little bit of a down patch, I think, from memory now. Good old Caleb. I'm just having a quick squeeze. Yeah, he's passed 3. He's gone 91, 102, and 96, so he's slowed up compared to the previous few weeks where he'd scored the 140, 137, and a 150. So hopefully he can turn that around. And he's still a primo, of course. And if you don't have him, you're in for a treat, because he's lost a little bit of cash and could go down to around about a 580k mark if you don't have him. So yeah, look to bring him in if you don't have him. Zach Butters, another disappointment. Again, just due to the tag, 76. The tagging is back in vogue, and it is annoying the shit out of me. And likewise, all of you out there that are owners of players that were tagged on the weekend. So 76 for him. Zach Merritt, of course, didn't play on the bye. Jack Steele, I think from reports he was tagged. I don't recall because I was actually flying in the air during that game. But Steele, 83, again, below par, frustrating. Tom Green, again, tagged, 80. It's just annoying, really. Revel, 58 for the Lions, not bad considering. McAuliffe, he was named the sub and only came on late for a score of 11, which virtually was, for a player that was offering me, or available virtually for this week, it really didn't offer much to me, considering the fact that he was sub. Of course, Walsh, Miller, and Clark didn't play. Moving to the ruck line, English bounced back with the 136, thankfully. A lot of people were looking to trade him out, or had traded him out, to the likes of a Grundy, who you probably still would have been happy with, but trading him to other rucks as well. I'm sticking by English. I think the one thing with him, I know he's frustrating to watch and frustrating to own, but the good thing about him is he does have a very high floor, so at least he has that going for him. So yeah, he's going to have these spike scores as well, I think, and especially considering that Rory Lobb played and took a fair bit of ruck time as well. I think English did well considering that, keeping that in mind. Kruger, 46, as I said, he was the new recruit. Below par for him anyway. I think I would have liked to have seen him score around about 60 to 70 odd, considering that he scored 70 thereabouts in his previous game, but was a warm body, gave us an extra 46 points that we wouldn't have had otherwise, so happy enough with that. Gawn, of course, on his bye. Moving to the forward line, we have Isaac Heaney, 141, just back to his scintillating form, as I spoke of as well. Zorko with 141 as my VC. Zach Fisher, 71, below par, could have actually gone up to close to 100, if not more, if he had converted that late shot on goal that would have gifted North the win, I think, in that game against the Pies. So, yeah, a bit of a nothing game there from Lefish. Lukey Jackson, 115, as I said. For those people that have owned him across the journey, don't get rid of him. He's a top 6 forward, and it's these games as well that he's going to have spike games. 115, super happy with that, and he's someone that you want to be keeping hold of in your team. Fraser from the Dogs, 68, happy enough with that, and Dowling as well, my new recruit, 55. Was a little bit worried that he may have been starting sub, or at least even subbed out of the game in game. So yeah, happy with the 55, and of course Flanders being on the bye, and Joe Richards, of course, being injured, not playing. So yeah, overall, I think I'm relatively happy enough with the round. Below par, as I said, but yeah, it could have been worse. And for a round that was, identified for me by a fair way out that it was going to be a tough week. It was thereabouts. We'll say that it was thereabouts. So in terms of what I was looking at, so McAuliffe was my 18th scorer before any other trade. So the part of the reason why I wanted to shift on Stewart was because of that. Like, Stewart to Houston gives me an extra player. And then outside of that, with who else was there? There was another guy that was potential. Of course, with Dawson not playing, unavailable, being injured last week. Of course, Will Dawson from North. It meant that I was down an extra player that I had thought was available. So him, and then of course we had Wangan and Miller being a late out for the Saints. That put me down a couple of players as well. So I was facing the prospect of only having 16, 17 players. So bringing in Houston helped. Of course, Kruger helped, and then Dowling as well. And it meant that I had 19 players. And so McAuliffe's score of 11 actually dropped out of my score and didn't count. So that was strategically a move from me that I'm happy enough with. But of course, Kruger I probably would have passed up, or Dowling, and maybe gone for one of these guys as they come out of their bye for round 16. But I needed their scores for this given week just to prop me up. But of course, both these guys as well, I speak of them, in terms of, maybe bypassing one and getting them in round 16, just due to the fact that both of these guys, Kruger and Dowling, now have their bye in round 15. So they're of no use to me for this week. But yeah, with that, let's probably segue into how we're looking heading into round 15. So we'll just make some changes here if we can. So Walshy comes back into the team. Out goes Steele. Tookie Miller, who looked to be a popular trade out by those that were a little bit annoyed with his game the previous round. But of course, keeping in mind he was tagged. Maxi Gawn comes back into the team, thankfully. And of course, Flanders comes back as well. Alrighty, so it does look as though, let's count them, and hopefully Wangan Miller is back. He was out through personal reasons, so hopefully he is back this coming round, for round 16. Of course, he's on the bye anyway this round, so it doesn't really affect us, but hopefully he's back for round 16. But let's go through and count the players that we have available for round 15. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 players on the dot before trades, of course. So happy enough with that, but yeah, it's one of those things where, we don't want to be making any trades just for the sake of getting in an extra player or two if it doesn't really benefit our side longer term. So I've used 3 trades the previous couple of weeks. I'm down to 7 trades as well, and I've only got one, spot to fill in the forward line at F6. And I'm kind of in two minds here because the options are as follows. There's Isaac Rankin, who I think is up there as like a top 6 forward. And then, of course, there's Charlie Curnow, who has been scoring well enough in recent times, has shown that he can score, consistently enough as well, which is probably the most important, but also having a big, big ceiling. Isaac Rankin, I'm a little bit worried about still with his hamstrings, because it was his second hamstring injury that he sustained this season. I think he had one in the preseason from memory, or early rounds. I'm worried about him re-injuring that hamstring as the season goes on. And, if it was earlier season, I'd probably take the risk. But by this stage of the year, with 7 trades in hand and, presumably getting in, a full team, I'm going to be down to 5 trades for injury. So I don't know if I want to go for Rankin as yet. Of course, he's on the bye this week. Charlie Curnow, my other option, of course, big old King Charles. He would offer me that extra player for this week because Carlton obviously coming off their bye against the Cats. The one thing that I do like, and we'll just have a quick squeeze at this. So the players that we would be looking to trade out, I guess, would probably be McAuliffe or a Fraser. Fraser I probably want to keep because he's playing well enough. He's a DPP player. And McAuliffe, as we've seen, he's been sub-affected. His break-even now is 96. So in terms of being that cash cow that we brought him in for, he's at the point now where he's actually dropping cash. He dropped 17.2k, Kane McAuliffe, on the weekend due to being that sub. But he's made us overall 120.8k. So he's well and truly played his role in terms of being that cash cow. And there's no other real player that we want to get rid of as a cash cow that's, not playing from week to week and maybe not offering us, points, more importantly, from week to week. So McAuliffe is the guy that I kind of am looking at moving on. Joe Richards, of course, is probably someone else that I could look to move on. He's injured. Hopefully is back. They're saying he's going to be back by round 16. So hopefully he's available then if we do need him. But I do think I'd much prefer to keep Fraser. But it comes down to how much cash we need to bring in a Curnow or Isaac Rankin. And I think with Curnow, we'll use him as an example. If we were to trade out McAuliffe, we'd have to flip a player back into the midfield, which will probably be Fraser in this case, or a Dowling. Sorry, we've got 449.2k available, and Curnow, get this, is available at the price of 448.3k. So just under what we have available. So we could get this trade done in one trade, which is great. Reason I say that is because I'm actually eyeing off Connor Rozee as my, 23rd man, we'll call it. Player to play off the bench and potentially loophole, depending on the performances of players that I have in my starting 22. And as we've seen in recent weeks as well, the likes of Walsh, Miller, Green especially, Butters on the weekend getting tagged. Miller was tagged the other week. All these guys are prone to having a down week. And depending on when they play in a given round, if their team plays early in the round, it does mean that we can almost screen their scores. And, if they don't score well enough, hopefully, Port play after them, and then we can, use a bit of a loophole option to loop on Rosee's score if the likes of Walsh, Miller, Green especially don't perform to expectations. So that's going to really give us a bit of a leg up from week to week going forward with Connor Rozee as well. So we might do this at the moment first and foremost. Sorry, before we get to that, Charlie Curnow, we might bring him into our team. As we said with where is he? Isaac Rankin. He's priced at 571.4k. We could still potentially go for him later in the season if we do have cash available. But as I said, we kind of hurt last year in terms of getting guys that we injured or, had injury clouds and just, broke down later in the season when we didn't have any trades. So despite the fact that Rankin does provide a little bit of a high floor and high ceiling at times, I do think it's comparable to Charlie Curnow. And let's just have a quick at Charles and what I'm referring to here. So Charlie Curnow, he's actually dropped 97k on the dot, and looking at his scoreline, obviously faces Geelong this week, who he scored 89, 103 and 103 against in his previous three. The good thing with Charlie is that he does have a relatively high floor. His lowest score is 59 for the season, but outside of that, he scored a 71, 90, 81, 80, 78, 96, 90, and 75 in terms of those scores below 100. Those scores above 100 have been 108, 103, 109, 122, so he doesn't really have that high scoring ceiling as yet. And we say as yet because Carlton have had a very, very tough run for the season to date. Outside of North Melbourne, who he scored that 122 against, Richmond, who he scored a 90 against, and that's about it really. I think every other team's been relatively competitive, but if we look forward for Carlton's fixture, and in terms of who they face, and of course who Curnow faces, I do apologise, I'm a little bit jet lagged, hence the reason why my brain is a little bit mush. But Richmond, Carlton face in round 16, North Melbourne in round 19, and then to finish the season as well, which is, it kind of coincides with SuperCoach finals, but we have Hawthorn in round 22, West Coast in round 23, and then St Kilda in round 24. And that is a very, very nice end to the season. And I think even if I wasn't going to go for Charlie now, I would look to bring him in later in the season. So I think I might flip that on its head, get Charlie into my team now, just because it allows me to, only use one trade to bring him in, but also use, a couple of trades if need be to try and get Connor Rosie into my team. So it virtually helps me finish my team a little bit faster and also get in that 23rd player faster as well, because I do think that's going to be beneficial for me in the short term, which is going to help long term as well. And then if I do need to bring in Isaac Rankin via another luxury trade or something, I'll look to do that at a later date. So maybe even via a Zach Fisher or the like, if it does get to that point. So I think for me, that does show that, with that nice fixture that Curnow and Carlton has, that there's going to be opportunities there for ceiling scores against Richmond, as I said, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, West Coast and Kilda, and even against Collingwood as well, who have been, I guess, susceptible to giving up scores to opposition forwards, and especially Charlie Curnow, who he's averaged 93.8 against in recent times in 8 games. So do like the look of Charlie's fixture there. So we will look to bring him in. So let's do that. It's going to leave us $900 in the bank. Of course, if we weren't able to afford this, we could have gone for Fraser. But as I said, I think Fraser is going to help us in terms of coverage if we need it over the coming, remainder of the season, really. So I'd much prefer to trade up McAuliffe, he virtually looks like that sub-risk, which, if we need to rely upon players like that, it could come back to bite you in the arse. So that's virtually what that does for us. Is it allows us to bring on Charlie Curnow, and it's going to give us 19 players for the week, which is going to be very, very handy. I still have the DPP switch between mid-forward, ruck forward as well with Kruger and Jackson, and then the defence forward as well, switch between Zach Fisher and Will Dawson from the North Melbourne Kangaroos. Having that, defence forward, ruck forward, mid forward, DPP is going to help us for coverage, not just for this last, bye round, and it has helped us across the bye rounds to date, but by and large for the remainder of the season as well, most importantly. So that's how we look at the moment, and super, super happy and thrilled with the way things are looking. Outside of those underperforming midfielders, of course, which is ultra frustrating. I know some people were bringing in the likes of a Goulden on the weekend, but, via a Miller or a Walsh or whatever. But I think Goulden's going to be in the same bracket as a Walsh, Miller, Green anyway, once it averages out over the course of the season. So I don't really see merit in doing that. And as I said, I'd much prefer to use that trade to bring in a Connor Rosie as my 23rd player, over the coming week or two. So looking ahead to that, Connor Rosie, he actually went down another 47.9k, would you believe, to now be priced at 418.9k. Very, very juicy price point. Has a break even of 130 this week facing Brisbane. Is at Adelaide Oval, so may try and push that break even, but I don't think he's going to eclipse it. So will no doubt go down further in price, hopefully closer towards that 400k mark. According to SuperCoach Gold, they've got him projected for a score of 63. That means he'll go down another 30k to be priced at 388.2k, which we'd be very, very happy with. But his current price point at 418.9k, we'd almost need to look to punt a Fraser to him. That'll still cost us another 140k. So we'd need to move on another cash cow. If we could, maybe via the likes of a Revel, that would give us a fair chunk of coin to help us out, but we can afford to wait on Rosie at least another week or maybe even 2. So, it's a 23rd man. It's not a must-have at this stage, more of a luxury more than anything. We'll look to do that and kind of discuss it over the coming weeks. But outside of that, ladies and gents, let's go through ever so quickly, of course, our VC and C options for the coming round. With the help, of course, of SuperCoach Plus, we'll look at the fixture here, and we have Carlton up against Geelong. So there is, of course, there's Walsh. Let's have a quick look at how he performed last time. I think he actually got tagged by I forget his name, the Irishman, O'Connor, I think it is. In terms of expectations, 158, 126, and a 104 ended up scoring. So maybe Walshy potentially is a VC, bit of a left field one. Curnow, how did he score against the Cats last time? Probably wouldn't put the VC on good old Charles, but he scored 89, 103, and 103. So maybe not. Port against the Lions. Butters, maybe. Lockie Neal, maybe. Giants against the Swans. Heaney probably speaks for itself. Let's have a look at how he performed last time they played. He scored a 109, so yeah, maybe. Looks to be a tough week actually for captains and VC options. Melbourne against North. Petrarca's obviously not playing. Oliver, no, you wouldn't trust. Yeah, no. Essendon against West Coast. Probably Merritt, I think, it probably speaks for itself. Conscious in this game as well. Sorry, the last game that he played, he started very, very slowly and then just burst out of the blocks and scored well enough. So I think Merritt is probably a VC option. Past 3, he scored 110, 143 and a 121, which was his most recent score against them. So, yeah, potentially a Merritt, even though keeping in mind as well that he plays in the second last game. So if you were to put the VC on him, you'd have to then put the captaincy on someone in the next game, which is Freo and Gold Coast. So you might be able to roll the dice on a Luke Ryan maybe up against Gold Coast. How has he scored in recent times against them? He scored a 128, 63 and a 93. So a bit of a mixed bag. The Suns, I don't know if they concede bulk points. Let's have a quick look at DFS Australia to see if there's any matchup correlations or, exploitations that we can look at here, because it looks like it's one of those rounds where we need to sort of look into this and look at matchups, because there's no real standard options apart from, as I said, Merritt. There's also Flanders as well against Freo. Let's have a quick look at this. So Freo against Gold Coast. They're pretty restrictive across the field apart from in the ruck. Is Gold Coast. What about Freo? Freo actually give up third most points, to opposition designated kickers. I don't know if that's going to include Flanders, but as we know with Flanders, he scored well against the Saints in recent weeks as well with that 152, and actually hasn't even scored below 100 all season. He's been probably the more consistent player of anyone really thus far. So don't mind him as an option, but it would have to be the captain option. Port Adelaide against the Lions. In terms of Zorko, no, they're pretty restrictive for opposition defenders. Yeah, it's a tough one. But as I always say, Liam and I will delve into this in a little bit more detail in our weekly episode, which of course is making a return. Of course, goes without saying, but we'll be making a return this week. So look out for that, of course. Apologies again that haven't been available, but just with the amount of work that I was doing over in the US, which of course was videoing, editing, covering the World Cup for the Grade Cricketer boys. It was a great trip and very, very, very rewarding, but of course very tiring, and not much time in between to really dedicate to my second love in SuperCoach. So apologies for that, but we are back on deck and we are keen to get things underway. Of course, the New York hat that I'm wearing here as well represent to New York City. Beautiful city. For those people that haven't been to it yet, highly recommend it, because it is my favourite city, hands down, in the world outside of Melbourne. And I've been travelling to Europe, UK, everywhere, and I've been pretty lucky across the journey, but New York is just, there's something special about it. It's incredible. But anyway, ladies and gents, with that, let us bid you farewell. And of course, we will catch you in the episode proper this week. Look out for it. It will be released on potentially Tuesday as usual, but we will be putting out a tweet as well. So if you have any questions, comments, as well as always, list them down below here on YouTube. If you are listening to us on podcast, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify and the like, feel free to give us a rating, of course, and you can hit us up on Twitter or Facebook, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. But of course, you can hit us up on Twitter as well for any questions that you want answered in the podcast. So, and with that, I'm off to get some sleep because the jet lag is slowly setting in, as you can probably tell. So with that, ladies and gents, we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.